Hello everyone and welcome. In this video I will be sharing my thoughts on The Walking Dead Season 10 Episode 12. As always is the norm with all my videos, I won't be holding back on any spoilers, and there are some pretty major spoilers from this episode, so consider that your warning. Anyway, without further ado, let's get to it. Holy shit, what an episode, and that ending, that was incredible. I mean, The Walking Dead really doesn't have any right being this clever. Let's not forget, this is a show in which Glenn survived a horde of walkers by hiding under a dumpster and just waiting for them to disappear. And in this episode we have this killer twist ending in which it's revealed that two characters have been working to take down Alpha, which I did not see coming at all, and it was amazing. Now normally I try to talk about the episodes that I review in chronological order, or as close to that as I can get, but to be honest I can't wait to talk about this ending, so I'm just going to dive in and talk about it right now. If you watched my last couple of videos you'll notice that I have criticised Negan quite a lot as he's got closer and closer to Alpha, and again for much of this episode I kind of felt the same. I was thinking that Negan was just acting like a prick for the sake of being a prick, and there was no real reason to it. I mean, firstly, he runs into Aaron whilst he's wearing his skin suit, and Aaron is desperately trying to drag Luke across the floor in some kind of like sled thing because Luke's injured, and then a group of walkers appear behind Negan, and instead of Negan helping Aaron, which he should do really, because I mean Aaron saved Negan before, he just sort of fucks off and leaves Aaron to fight a group of walkers whilst also trying to look after Luke, who's practically dead. So yeah, I saw that and I just felt, Negan, you are a dick. You're here trying to plead to Aaron that, oh, it's not what it looks like, yet you just leave him to fend for himself when Aaron saved you in the past. So that was the first dick move that he made this episode. Number two is when he encounters Lydia in the woods, and it's clear from Lydia's expression that she's happy to see Negan. I mean, I expect she trusts him because Negan has protected her in the past, but instead of helping her, he just says, right, I'm taking you back to your mum. And that was another point in which I just wanted to strangle Negan and just say, what the hell are you doing? And then finally, during the conclusion of the episode, he leads Alpha to the building in which he's captured Lydia so she can kill her. Except, well, that's not the case at all, because it turns out the building that he leads Alpha to is completely empty. We as viewers are led to believe that Negan has taken Alpha to the same house in which Lydia is stationed, except he hasn't. And then when Alpha opens the door and is confused at the sight of an empty building, Negan takes the opportunity to slice her throat open, ending the leader of the Whisperers. It's absolutely brilliant, and in my mind I actually prefer Alpha's TV death to the comics, which I know is going to be very controversial. I do think the comics still has the shock factor over the TV show because it all happens so quickly. Out of nowhere he just chops her head off, whereas towards the end of this scene when Negan was leading Alpha to the house and slowly walking behind her, I did think to myself, yep, he is going to kill her, so I did figure it out, albeit not straight away. I just got this feeling that Negan wouldn't have spent his time trying not to convince Alpha to kill Lydia just to then let her go and do it, and in retrospect it's obvious that Negan was actually testing Alpha, and despite how messed up Alpha may actually be, I do think Negan might have harboured some genuine feelings for her. He mentions his late wife Lucille to Alpha and says that even when she was having treatment for cancer and she lost all her hair, he still found her to be beautiful, and this obviously has some parallels to the bald Alpha. Whether this was all planned and he brought this up just to make Alpha think that he liked her more than he did, or if he did actually see something of his ex-wife, his deceased wife, sorry, in Alpha and therefore did have feelings for her, is up for debate. To be fair to Negan, he did give Alpha a lot of opportunities not to go through with her plan. He said that Lydia wasn't a weakness but a strength, and he even questioned her ideology multiple times. However, it's clear that Alpha is too far gone. She isn't going to change, and she's deluded to the point whereby she thinks that killing her daughter is the right thing to do, which is why Negan had to kill her. Had Alpha changed her mind and decided to spare Lydia, I honestly think that Negan would have also let Alpha walk away with her life. And despite all the truly horrible shit that Alpha has done since she's been on the show, I did feel a bit of sadness when she died, because I do think that deep down she does love Lydia, but it's just her warped mind won't allow her to admit it, and she has this wall up in which she thinks that she needs to be strong and eliminate these kind of things. So yeah, I do think there was some humanity to her, but she just wouldn't let it come through. If Negan killing Alpha wasn't shocking enough for you, well, the episode ends with Negan having her decapitated head in a bag, which he then rolls on the floor, and then the camera pans up to Carol, who says, "Took you long enough." So that means that these two have actually been working together to take down Alpha. What an absolute headfuck. I can't believe that Carol has been working with Negan. I mean, even though I saw Alpha's death come in, not in a million years did I see these two working together, and yeah, that is an awesome twist. It also makes me question whether Negan has been deep undercover with the Whisperers the entire time. And looking at the Aaron scene, which I mentioned earlier, I can kind of see it now in a different light, because although I criticised him for not helping Aaron, I mean, think about it this way. If Negan had rushed to Aaron's defence and killed all the walkers around him, if a Whisperer had seen that, they might have blown Negan's entire cover. So it kind of makes sense now when you look back at some of his actions in the context of what we find out at the end of the episode. You can tell that a narrative twist is good when you can go back and watch something with that new information in mind and it still makes sense. I mean, take the film Get Out, for example. I bloody love that film. Now, in no way am I comparing this twist to the twist in Get Out, because that's one of my favourite films of the last 10 years. But Get Out is one of those films that, when you watch it for a second time, a lot of the odd behaviours of the characters that you initially didn't understand first time round makes a lot of sense. And it's the same for this. You can go back and understand why Negan was acting aloof and acting like a dick, and his pleads to Aaron that, you know, it's not what he thinks it is, were actually true. The only minor issue that I have about all this is, why did Negan tie Lydia up and take her to a random house? I mean, I get why the scene played out like this from a viewer perspective, because as viewers we see shots of Lydia in the house struggling to escape, intertwined with shots of Alpha and Negan heading towards the door, and then it's revealed that when Lydia opens the door, she's in fact in another place entirely, and that's when the shot twist comes that, hey, Negan's taken her to an empty building. And as a way of presenting this, yeah, I absolutely think it's incredible. But if it turns out Negan just took her to a building for no reason, it might make the twist a bit dumb. So I am hoping, please, be an explanation for this rather than it just for the twist to happen, because yeah, if he just takes her to a building and ties her up for no reason, then that's a bit dumb. And I'm hoping that's not the case. Also, before I move on to talking about some of the other points from the episode, I have to say that once again it is really refreshing to see a huge Walking Dead moment happen in an episode in the middle of the season, episode 12. I mean, in terms of viewership, this probably isn't going to be an episode that has the highest ratings, and it's quite risky to put such a major plot point in episode 12. I mean, think back to when Scott Gimple was in charge. Pretty much everything happened, every big plot point happened in the premiere, mid-season finale, or season finale. It was so fucking predictable. And then with Angela Kang, we've had the Pikes, or heads on Pike spikes moment that happened in episode 15, I think, last season. And now we've had this in episode 12. So that's what you want as a viewer, because it keeps you on edge. It stops you sort of watching the show and thinking, oh, well, these next 7 episodes are just going to be filler, and then when it gets to the end of the season, someone might die and something might happen. That's not what we want to watch, and that's not what The Walking Dead of old was like. I mean, think back to the episode when Laurie died, which again is one of my favourite episodes. I'm sure that was in episode 3 or 4 of the season 3 I think it was. Yeah, and then sort of from 6 onwards, 6 to 8, it all became too predictable. So again, credit to Angela Kang for getting this in episode 12 rather than just at the end or start of the season. Although Alpha's death is going to be the biggest talking point of the episode, she wasn't the only person to bite the dust. In fact, there were 2 others. And next up, I'm going to talk about Gamma. So after the battle at Hilltop, it turns out that all the protagonists are split up into different groups, and Gamma finds herself with Alden. Oh, what's Connie's sister called? I always forget her name. Kelly, that's the one. And her nephew, come on, what's her nephew called? Adam. So we first see this group walking along the roadside somewhere, and Alden is holding a baby who won't stop crying, and initially he's reluctant to give him over to Gamma. Why am I so bad with names now? Anyway, he eventually gives in after he can't get Adam to stop crying, at which point he sort of realises that Gamma might not be as bad as he's made her out to be. And Gamma only goes on to prove this point when she leads a group of walkers away from Alden and Kelly, at which point Beta appears and brutally stabs her, kills her, and lets her turn. I have to say that I didn't expect Gamma to die so soon after being introduced. I don't think she's been on the show for too long. However, I do understand that with Alpha dead, they probably wanted to kill off Gamma because that then leaves Beta as the only sort of person who could lead the Whisperers. But I still kind of, not disappointing, but I still would have liked to have seen a bit more of her because I felt she was an interesting character. Also, quickly, whilst I've mentioned Beta, I liked how his celebrity background that is in the comics is referenced. when he loses a bit of his walker skin and another whisperer says, "Oh, it's you, I thought I recognised you," and then he kills him for some reason because he obviously doesn't like his fans. I can't remember exactly what it was that Beta did before the apocalypse in the comics. I think he was an NFL player or a baseball player or some sport that only Americans care about. But regardless, it's a nice little nod for people like me who read the comics, and I'm sure it'll be brought up again in the future. Moving on to the third death of this week's episode, being Earl Sutton. Now, if you watched my review of episode 11, I mentioned how much I liked Earl in that episode, and that meant he would probably die in the next one. And that was only a joke. You didn't have to actually kill him, The Walking Dead. So for some reason, instead of escaping with the kids, Ezekiel decides to take a nap under a metal sheet. I guess being up all night fucking Carol really took it out of him, which means that in his place, Earl took the kids instead, and immediately I clocked onto the fact that something was wrong because, to be honest, he looked like absolute shit, so it was no surprise when it was revealed that he's been bitten. Judith goes to talk to Earl and sees his bite mark, and I think that despite how much I have liked this season, one of the negative points of having the first half focus so much on the Dante and Sadiq storyline is that we haven't seen enough of Judith, and this just reminded me of why I love her character. Because she isn't scared of Earl, she doesn't immediately run away or wince at seeing the bite. Instead, she says that she will stay with him because no one deserves to be alone when they turn, which is just a really nice and lovely thing to do. However, Earl rejects this offer and instead decides to kill himself in the same manner that Heath Ledger kills that dude in The Dark Knight with a pencil, but instead he does it with a nail. Honestly, if I was him, I would have just asked to use Judith's katana instead. It would have been a lot less messy. I have to say that I did see Earl coming back as a walker though, because I think that even if you've accepted that, right, this is how I'm going to kill myself, I'm going to headbutt a nail, I think part of you instinctively would hold back from unleashing like your full force on it. So even though it would kill you, I don't think it would destroy your entire brain. So I kind of felt that, yeah, he's going to come back as a walker, and I don't have many criticisms of this episode, but I think the predictability of that was a bit of a letdown. However, I do still like the resolution of this when Daryl walks in to find a shell-shocked Judith and sits down and comforts her, because it's just one of those sort of human moments that we've come to expect from Angela Kang. I mean, how many times, honestly, can you remember Rick sitting down with Carl and hugging him or just being a dad to him? Now, I know Rick was incredibly busy and had a lot of shit going on, but yeah, he wasn't a great dad, I don't think, and it's nice to see that Daryl has now stepped up to that dad role to Judith in his absence. Right, so I've talked about everything except the start of the episode, so let's go all the way back and talk about that. Now, the first opening 5 minutes or so are a continuation of the end of last episode, in which it's the battle at Hilltop, and I have to admit, first off, I was a bit disappointed that after the sort of opening crawl finished, the battle was over and we'd moved ahead to the next day, but I can kind of understand why they didn't spend too much time on the battle considering all the other crazy shit that goes on during this episode. Anyway, the battle. So although it might not have lasted long, it did kind of remind me of the better seasons of Game of Thrones, and that's not just because they had similar weaponry. I think it was the scale of it. I mean, there were some really good aerial shots in which you see piles and piles of walkers all on top of each other with like fire in the background and stuff, and it kind of reminded me of the White Walkers in Game of Thrones. At times The Walking Dead does have some questionable special effects, and sometimes you can tell when there's not much budget for an episode. I mean, look at the episode with the CGI deer, for example, but it looks like they went all out with this one. I thought it looked absolutely brilliant. Some of the kills were absolutely brutal. I felt the thud of Daryl's ball and chain as he whacked it and it smashed the Whisperer's head and he fell to the floor. And Eugene was just on another level, taking out walkers left, right and centre because he knew that he had a date to get to and nothing was going to stop him. So I thought it was a decent action sequence, even if it didn't last that long. But again, like I said, that's not really an issue when you consider how good the rest of the episode is. I think my favourite scene from the start, though, is when Ezekiel can't find Judith, and you would assume that Judith being a kid, that means she's in trouble, but instead it skips to the next scene and she's there with a katana chopping up a Whisperer. And again, that's just why I like Judith. How can you not like her at this point? So I think I've pretty much covered everything that I want to from this episode. There's one thing I want to mention though, and that is the fact that Carol must have an iron jaw. I mean, look at this clip.
Go through shit. To go through shit.
Yumiko punches her in the face, there's no blood or anything, she just carries on. What is this woman made of? Either that or Yumiko just has a really shit punch. And by the way, I fully agree with Yumiko punching her in the face because I felt that Carol was a complete dick at this point. She was just trying to shrug off her actions and just say, oh, it didn't matter anyway. Like, what's wrong with you? So, Yumiko, you did good. I have to stand up for my British pals. Well done. And that's it for my thoughts on this video. I think this episode now goes alongside some of my favourite episodes of The Walking Dead. It did have a few minor nitpicks, but it's nothing major, and I think the ending and the twist was absolutely superb. And yeah, all round an incredible episode. And I think I do have to mention just how good Samantha Morton has been as Alpha. We've been lucky to have her on the show. Personally, I never really felt that Alpha was that great in the comics, which again I know is going to be controversial because everyone loves her, but I just felt that she was a bit bland. She was killed off far too quickly, whereas she's developed into a much better character in the show. It's kind of how when you look at like Comic the Governor, who was just evil, he didn't really have a background, he wasn't really developed, and I felt that the TV show did him justice, did him a lot better. And I feel the same with Alpha. I feel that she was killed off far too early in the comics, she didn't really get to develop, and I've enjoyed how much time we've had with her on the show. I know a lot of people have said that they feel like The Walking Dead has dragged it out with her, she should have been dead by now, blah blah blah, but I disagree. I think that Alpha's time on the show has been very good, and I'm struggling to think of adjectives to say, but I think, yeah, no, I think the show has handled it really well, and I'm looking forward to seeing the conclusion of this season. So I think this is a brilliant episode, and I hope you do as well. If you don't, let me know why, and if you think that I've sold out and that I'm being too positive about this episode, well, guess what? You're correct. AMC paid me a hell of a lot of money to big up this episode. Now, if you excuse me, I'm off to the bank. And in all seriousness, I thought this was very good. And like some of the comments have said on my community post yesterday, you know, I'm normally quite critical about everything. So hopefully that means something to you. I don't know. But anyway, let me know your thoughts on this video. Did you like it? Did you hate it? And we're finally up to date on this channel. We're finally not behind. I'm up to date with the show. Only took me like 6 months to get there, so that's good going forward, and hopefully that means now the next 4 episodes I can review on a weekly basis like I have done. I was going to say, how many years have I been doing this now? I think like season 8? Did I start on season 8? Oh, I must have started season 7. Yeah, I think I did season 7. Yeah, because I was looking at those reviews the other day and they were like 5 minutes long. I was like, how did I make a video that was 5 minutes and talk about an episode? They must be really shit. I'd have to watch them sometime. But anyway, that's enough talking from me. Take care, see you later, and be careful with coronavirus, people. Be careful. Self-isolate. I've been self-isolating most of my life. So, you know, sitting in a room, watching telly, playing games, it's nothing new to me. It's what I do normally. So, there you go. What am I talking about now? I don't know. I'm going to end the video. Bye.